raise your badges. All opposed? Abstain? Motion fails. Frank Cameretta. By the way, 8 a.m. 11:21 is the same as 8 a.m. 11:40. Put an X, mark out 11:40. Frank Cameretta for 8 a.m. 11:09. Frank. Right here?
He's here.
You're on.
Frank! All right, this is basically his motion from last year. Really, the intent is to go back to the way that we were before the one man, one vote. I know it's been looked at by bylaws. My feeling's always been that really you shouldn't be voting on things if you either don't have a skin in the game or if you don't care. I mean, we have a good organization. People who want to be involved in chess can be involved. They can make things happen at the local, state, and national levels. Giving a vote to everybody has got an expense. And in many cases, you're giving votes to people who really don't care. Their votes not only doesn't mean much, it can be harmful in some cases. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, the bylaws committee considered this, as did the bylaws workshop. I will add, we didn't have the benefit of Frank being there at the workshop. The vote in the committee was 2 in favor, 10 against. The vote in the workshop was 0 in favor, 20 against, 0 abstentions. I think people were impressed by the fact of the number of persons who registered to vote this year, and they felt this wasn't the time to go back to the old system.
Discussion. Ready to vote? All in favor of 8 a.m. 11:09, raise your ballots. All opposed? Abstain? Motion fails. 11:11. Continuing 8 a.m. from Larry Cohen. State, it's been referred to state, so Guy Hoffman gets the first crack at it.
Crack at it would be the right term. Upon finding this in the agenda, I was kind of surprised. It's the first draft of the minutes that I had said this had failed last year. The new minutes said that it had been referred to our committee. Promptly asked Larry if he was going to withdraw this, and he said yes. Mike Nolan said, "We can't do that." So we had a brief discussion on our committee. Nobody liked it. We had a discussion in the workshop. Nobody liked it. Therefore, I'll move to table this indefinitely.
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Postpone indefinitely, right?
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Do we vote on that?
Yes.
Why not just kill it?
That's what postpone indefinitely does.
Been a motion to postpone indefinitely.
That's what I heard.
All in favor of postponing indefinitely, 11:11. All opposed? Abstention? Motion passes to postpone indefinitely, AKA kill it. We're down to new business. We're going to do 11:22 first. I'm going to pass.
Excuse me, Mr. President, we do 11:12 first. 11:22 comes right after 11:12.
Okay. 11:12. I'm going to hand the mic to Ruth now, who has some OJT.
Harold Winston indicated he is a co-sponsor, which is fine. I don't think there's any question that Dwayne Barber deserves to be a delegate at large, considering the amount of time, effort, and cash he has put into national chess, into the Dinker, into various areas within scholastic chess, now with the Barber tournament as well. We've found that he is a very good resource, and he's willing to work with everybody, and therefore we move that he be named a delegate at large, and we do realize that it is going to take a supermajority both this year and next year, but he definitely deserves it, and we advocate its passing. Thank you.
And I agree with Myron. This is an easy one to pass, and boy, he sure deserves it. Thank you.
Just to add a technical note, we need 3/4, so we need to have a showing of hands and cards, and the chair has to announce that 3/4 has been met.
I just want the body to know the Scholastic Committee supports this motion unanimously, and the Scholastic Workshop also supports this motion unanimously. That's a total of 34 votes in favor, although some people got to vote twice on the committee and the workshop.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes.
Again, just so the minutes are clear, does the chair recognize it got a 3/4 vote in favor? Because that's necessary. No, you want the 3/4. It's got to. Says the bylaws specifically say you've got to get a 3/4 vote 2 years. Will the chair announce that it was 3/4?
There was one abstention, that was Dwayne Barber.
So there was indeed 3/4.
Motion passes over 3/4.
Would that be $1?
I should point out that we have to do this again.
Yes.
Next item is
Myron did.
1122. Turn to page 18.
ADM 1122 is a product of the work of the Governance Task Force. The Governance Task Force included Guy Hoffman, Richard of Wisconsin, Richard Kepke of Northern California, Myron Lieberman of Arizona, Devon Naradian of Illinois, Gary Walters of Ohio, Bill Deutschberg of New York, Ruth Herring of Northern California, Brian Watershead of Massachusetts, Harold Winston of Illinois, and David Quinn of New York, I believe. This is a long and complex motion. Based on discussion at the workshops and in committee, I'm now moving to split the question.
Second.
There is one section which is much less controversial than the rest. It is, so we are going to split out, then I'm proposing we split out. It's on the right-hand column of page 18. It's your fourth major paragraph down. It states Article 9, Section 8 is amended to read, early in each fiscal year, the Executive Board shall engage properly qualified, independent, certified public accountants to review the Federation's accounts in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That is a change from, well, that's the part we would split out and consider separately. That motion is on the floor, and I think we'll second it.
Yeah.
Discussion on the motion to split?
Divide the question.
Oh, to divide the question. Okay. All in favor?
purpose of changing this Article 9, Section 8, what we are proposing to do is delete the last sentence of existing Article 9, Section 8, which provides for the delegates to ratify the selection of the accountants. Here's the problem with that. The fiscal year end of the Federation is May the 31st. The accountants completed their audit a couple of weeks ago, and their audit report has been issued and is available here and was handed out on your way in. We are in no way prepared to select the auditor for next May 31. So we leave the delegates with the choice of ratifying the selection of the auditor after the auditor has completed their work, or ratifying the auditor for next year, which would have to be the same people as this year and provides us no way to change the auditor if the office and the finance committee and the audit committee think that that would be prudent. So therefore, we don't do it. It seems silly to have a provision in our bylaws that we do not do.
This was considered both by the Bylaws Committee and at the Bylaws GTF workshop. The committee voted in favor of making this change, 10 yes, 2 no, 1 opposed. The workshop was overwhelmingly in favor, 31 yes, 0 no, 1 abstention.
Discussion?
A question for Harold.
Go to the mic, please.
What were the no's? Not who, what?
I think one of them was concerned about the role of accountants in general and thought the delegates should have some say. But again, it didn't make sense to the rest of us because, as Alan pointed out, the delegates meeting comes too late to have any effect or too early in the alternative. The other one I don't think explained their position.
More questions or comments? Okay. So we're going to vote on the amendment?
On the divided question.
On the divided question?
Article 9,
Article
Section
9,
8.
Section 8. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Now to take up the remainder of 1122. The Governance Task Force began in 2010. It was a board-appointed committee given the task of exploring ways in which the governance structure of the U.S. Chess Federation should be altered. Last year, the Governance Task Force produced several thoughts and ideas which were incorporated in various ADMs and which led to changes in the way in which we do voter registration, led to changes in the way in which we have petitions filed for executive board candidates, among others. This year we began work in the spring with essentially the same task force as last year. The chairman was Joe Lutz of New Jersey. In March, Joe resigned from that position, and I became the chairman in April. I do want to take the moment to thank the members of the task force for their hard work through the course of 6 weeks of extensive exchanges of thoughts and ideas. We are bringing these thoughts to the delegates. The intention of 1122 of the task force this year is to bring 1122 to you all for comment and review. And then we have some work that still remains on it. Very much like was done with the one man, one vote from the Blue Ribbon Committee. It came to this body and then came back a year later after some tweaks were made to it based on your comments and review. That is what we want to do today. 1122 does the following. 1122 attempts to change the legal board of directors of the organization from the Board of Delegates to the Executive Board, while leaving the Board of Delegates with the power that it presently has to control the bylaws of the organization, control the articles of incorporation of the board of the organization, approve the budget, appoint the existing committees that are appointed by the delegates. The effect that we are trying to do is simply to change who the legal directors of the corporation are. Why? Because right now we have 150 directors that change regularly and rapidly. That changed this morning. That will change tomorrow afternoon. That will change next month. That have changed multiple times over the last 3 or 4 months. We cannot run a railroad that way. We have more legal exposure to the delegates, with the delegates being the board of directors. I don't think that legal exposure is very large, honestly. But right now, directors have higher legal liability than do delegates to an assembly. So it's an attempt to change that as well. How do we go about affecting it? In your delegates call was the draft that we put forth, and then we've continued to work on it and tweak it. That draft, frankly, had some language issues that we knew when we submitted it. That's why we continue to work on it. That draft did not have the support of Harold Winston of our committee, primarily because I think Harold, and I can let Harold speak for himself, but we've talked about it enough, I can articulate his position, I believe, that it did not, in Harold's opinion, be as clear about reserving the existing powers of the Board of Delegates as what he would like. As we continue to work on it, even after the submission of the ADM, and through the workshop process, and through the Bylaws Committee review after the GTF submitted it, we took as our model for a change in the language the bylaws of the Illinois State Bar Association, an Illinois nonprofit corporation. The language that we have at this point is, you're trying to make it a little bigger for me?
Trying to get more of it on pages.
I see what you're doing. Was presented in our workshop and was presented to our bylaws meeting to change the language of the description. Well, there we go. You're too far down there. Yeah. Of our description of the powers of the delegates. There we go, right there. Right there. To read, the Board of Delegates shall formulate general policy under the bylaws, approve the annual budget, amend the bylaws, and we have inserted the Articles of Incorporation and the U.S. official rules of chess, and supervise the ethics compliance process of the Federation. The Board of Delegates shall formulate general policy under the bylaws. That's what we do here. Approve the annual budget. We do that here. Amend the bylaws. We do that here regularly. The rules of chess. Again, something we do frequently. Insert the Articles of Incorporation, which have not changed since 1939. Much?
I think we're in the process of changing and dealing with the C3 stuff.
Yeah. And supervise the ethics compliance process, retaining the right to final appeal of ethics complaints.
Point of privilege.
Yes.
Do we have written up there what's actually under consideration? Yeah, we need the insertion of and the Articles of Incorporation. Thank you.
So that's the language that we had at first. Okay? That's the language that we had at first. As we worked on this in the bylaws and in the other committee, Mike is in the process of putting that language up. No, I gave you the wrong one. The Bar Association language, which Mike is in the process of putting up, says the legislative and governing body of the USCF shall be the Board of Delegates. The Board of Delegates shall be the supreme authoritative body of this federation and shall determine the policies that shall govern the USCF in all of its activities. Among other things, it shall have the authority to amend the Articles of Incorporation, the bylaws, and the USCF rules of chess, approve the annual budget, and supervise the ethics compliance processes of the Federation. I'm an auditor, I can read upside down. It's a handy skill when you're already interviewing someone. So absorb that for a minute. The bylaws retain the ability to do the budget, retain the ability to change the rules, retain the ability to amend the bylaws, retain the ability to change the articles of incorporation.
The word association is federation.
Federation. And retain the ability to supervise ethics.
Question, under the new proposal, are there anything such as a delegate appointed committee, or are those all appointed by the board of directors?
The question of Mr. Steve Emmett of New York is, under this proposal, are there still such things as delegate appointed committees? The bylaws presently provide, and we are proposing no change in, the fact that at this point no change in, and I'll explain that the delegates appoint the members of the audit committee, the ethics committee, the life member asset management committee, and the bylaws committee, and the election committee. Those 5 we are proposing would not change. However, one thing we're struggling with, that why we need to bring this back next year, is that there is a provision of the Illinois nonprofit statute that says that committees that can bind the corporation must be comprised of at least 2 directors, which under the new scheme would be the executive board, and which are comprised of a majority of directors. Arguably, the Life Member Asset Committee can bind to the corporation by buying and selling assets. So that creates a problem as to how we get around it, because I don't think anyone believes that we want to change the structure of the independence of the LMA. I've been on the LMA from the board. So we've been trying to find a way to solve that problem. We have a way, we believe, to solve that problem, which is to create a separate LMA corporation, which will be a corporation, a member corporation of the USCF. Its sole member will be the USCF. And the USCF Board of Delegates will appoint the directors of that corporation. Frankly, folks, we need to do more legal work on that. That's why we're not asking for you to approve this year. That needs some more work. Okay? But I have several clients, I have a lot of clients that have that structure, and you're involved with organizations that have that structure too. If you're involved in a professional association that has its board of directors and has an educational foundation that's attached to it, you have something that has that structure, probably. Okay? Did that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Shep.
Are there anything that the delegates would not be able to do that they currently can do? Are there any laws or restrictions on the powers of the delegates as this new proposal?
Are there any changes, Mr. Shudd has asked, are there anything in this proposal that would change what delegates, that would prevent delegates from having the power that they have now. No, there are nothing that would prevent the delegates from having the power that they have now. However, the way in which they control the LMA may change. Okay, instead of being a committee appointment, we may be appointing the directors of that corporation. Likewise, did we scroll down to the section 6, the Article 6, Section 2 language, please?
Yeah, actually, there is one.
Okay, go ahead, Harold.
Right, the only thing I think that would change, other than what we already changed on the accountants, would be currently we have ratification by the delegates. If they're no longer the directors, I'm not convinced that that ratification would be necessary. But I don't think that's a very big change.
Okay. Along with this would be a change in Article 6, Section 2. You see the first language that we came up with there in your delegates call? I'm not sure any of us crafting that were real happy with it, frankly. Because I can't tell you what giving due priority to the missions, goals, and policies established by the Board of Delegates means. So therefore, borrowing this from the Illinois State Bar Association, modifying it a bit, our present language says the executive board shall be the board of directors, which is the administrative and managing body of the USCF, and is vested with full power to conduct all business of the Federation, subject to the laws of the state of Illinois, the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, and the mandates of the Board of Delegates.
Have I got everything in there now?
Yes.
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 Mr. Camerata?
That last sentence looks, I mean, the delegates could clearly by that direct the board of directors to do something that could expose the Federation to some serious legal liability. And in fact, the board of directors may decide they don't want to do that. Where are we at that point?
In the same position that we are today. The question was, what happens if the delegates were to direct the executive board as the board of directors to take a position that exposed the Federation to significant legal liability? First of all, to answer that question in about 2 or 3 parts. First of all, if the delegates were to take an action that were inconsistent with the bylaws, that was not an amendment of the bylaws, then the board doesn't follow that. Because the bylaws will rule over, which happens today. If you all came in and did something contrary to the bylaws at this meeting, we did, it would not be effective. If we did something that was contrary to the law in Illinois, we would not be able to do it. So, did that answer the question? It would be something that we would have to do, like we do now, provided it did not violate the others. But there's a hierarchy here for a reason. Okay? That hierarchy would still come into play.
I'm just wondering, does that solve the problem that you're trying to solve, or is that simply leave it in place? Because I would suspect if we directed them to do something, then there's a certain exposure on our part too.
If the question was, does that solve the problem we're trying to solve? Because if the delegates directed the board to do something contrary to the bylaws, it would give exposure to the delegates. It certainly would give exposure to the delegates if the delegates violated the law. However, you also have the check that the board doesn't take that action. I mean, honestly, that's what we have today. That's exactly what we have today. We did not undertake this project for the primary purpose of trying to reduce the delegates' legal liability. That was down here in priority. Making the organization work effectively was up here in priority. Being able to tell who our directors were. Being able to avoid the musical chair thing of who directors are and how it works. That was way up here in priority.
Frank, if I can just add to that a bit. You know, don't underestimate persuasive power at these meetings of the executive director and the executive board. The history of this organization over the last 42 years, when I've been coming to a delegate meeting every year, has been very rarely have the delegates overridden or gone against the wishes of the executive board, particularly when the executive director agrees with them. So I think the idea of the delegates creating an exposure when they're going to get all this good advice from up here on the podium is a really very remote one.
Jim Manella, New Jersey. I don't believe the question was actually answered. What if the delegates direct the board to do something that is not in violation of bylaws?
Then the executive board has to do it, just as it has to do it now.
But if the executive board is also the board of directors, why do they have to do it?
Because Article 6, Section 2 will read that the board of directors is vested with full power subject to, and one of the things it's subject to is the mandates of a board of delegates. That makes it explicit that if a board of delegates issue a mandate, the executive board has to follow it, just as occurs now.
Well, I'm still unconvinced. We're getting a lot of assurances that this changes nothing, but if it changes nothing, why do it?
Okay, but remember, we're not proposing the change be made now. We're trying to refine this for action next year.
And we're not saying it changes nothing. There's a profound change here. Let's be clear on that. There is a profound change here. We change who the legal directors of this corporation are. We make it clear who the legal directors of this corporation are. We remove the need for the office to continually update filings with the Secretary of State of Illinois of changing the directors. We make it very clear, and that solves a significant problem in the governance structure of this organization. Gerald, I think if you guys want to speak, you might want to come up to the microphone.
So you might want to move so you're not standing in the street. Mike, read your sweater.
Bill Hall?
I'm probably at the wrong microphone, but the key thing here, and this was a lot of what I was referencing in my report about cleaning up some of the problems with the governance structure, and I can give you an informal report from the Committee of Corporate Attorneys that the USCF has had in the past 6 years, that by a vote of 8-0, they would 100% support this change. As a matter of fact, they say it is insane that we have the current structure. And for legitimacy, we have to find a way to make this change. They would also, I'm sure, strongly caution to make sure that you do the change appropriately. So a two-stage process is certainly reasonable there. But it doesn't change anything as far as the liability structure to the organization or items like that. There's a little bit less exposure to the delegates individually, but like Alan said, that's not been the primary focus. The way the things currently stand, just like I myself, before I was hired, there was a board motion passed that said that the executive director can only sign a contract with a $10,000 liability to the Federation in 1-year term, or $30,000 if it's in conjunction with the president. I can go sign $1 million contract anytime, and almost definitely cause a liability for the Federation that the Federation will have to follow. The only thing that rule does is it means that the Federation has good cause to make me personally liable for having done that if the organization did not want that. And basically that's the only protection that the delegates have now with the executive board. And that's the same protection that would be in place after this type of a change. the executive board can essentially act as the board of directors now. The problem is reporting to Illinois and the legal structure of who is the delegates of the USCF. I think that if we don't do a change like this, we need to go far further than having people sign an acceptance of their delegate position. We need to have at least a 4 or 5 page document explaining the rights and responsibilities of the delegates and require that acknowledgement and receipt of that is signed for and sent to the office, and create a whole bunch more work for the office. But the key point is being a director of a corporation is serious. And so this needs to be taken seriously, and no one in their right mind believes that we should have 145, 150, 160 directors of a corporation.
Before you all ask questions, if I could kind of finish explaining this proposal, because the rest of it is very simple, even though it has a lot of verbiage to it. The change in Article 9, Section 12, the change in Article 9, Section 13, the change in Article 9, Section 14, simply every place where it only says director, we've made it say director and delegate. And every place where it only said delegate, we've made it say director and delegate. Primarily, you can see what the differences are between the two if you lay these side by side with the bylaws. But the rest of it, as stated in the motion, is just kind of making everything consistent. So,
question. Under this agreement, the executive board will have not one more power than they do now. Is that correct?
with the possible exception of the Board of Delegates not having to ratify the acts of the board at this meeting, the answer to your question is yes. The delegates will retain the right to amend the bylaws, which they have now. The executive board could not amend the bylaws on their own. The executive board could not amend the articles of corporation, but the delegates would have to do that. The executive board could not change the official rules of chess. The delegates have to change the rules of chess. The delegates would still retain the right to approve an annual budget. However, as Randy Bauer mentioned, there are adjustments made in that budget during the course of the year, as happened today. And then the ethics compliance process is on there because this is the ultimate body. The Board of Delegates is the ultimate body to whom ethics rulings can be appealed. Presently, ethics rulings can be appealed to the executive board, and their decision then appealed to the body of delegates. And there is a provision in the ethics codes that the executive board can originate an appeal of an ethics ruling. That all remains the same. None of that wording changes. So my short answer to your question is, except for the potential, well, except for the lack of need for the delegates to ratify those actions as being consistent, which we may want to do anyway, there is no change in power. We carefully drafted this to try to retain the balance of power that we have today. Because frankly, I don't think we think anything else would be acceptable to the delegates. And I have no desire to change that balance of power personally.
With the board sitting behind me, I have no problem with this. But I look back several years at some of the executive boards and before that policy boards we've had that have made some very bad decisions for the good of chess. And therefore, I would be opposed to this if we're automatically giving approval to every single action the executive board makes, and the delegates do not have the authority to override those with the motion at the beginning of the agenda, just like we had today.
Yeah, I'd like to address the ratification issue. It's been stated that the main reason for making this change is that it's too confusing, too unwieldy to have such a large board of directors and to have the directors changing so frequently. And while that's true, I think there's another very important reason why this change should be made, and it relates to the ratification. Right now, the reason we ratify is because we believe that if there's no ratification, then the motions that are passed have not really been authorized by the board of directors of the corporation. Therefore, the ratification. But it causes potentially a very serious problem. Let me give you an example. You know, the very nasty lawsuit situation we had, you know, that really culminated in Indianapolis. At the Indianapolis meeting, there was, as usual, the motion to ratify. The strategy by the other side that was suing the USCF was to defeat that motion. If that motion had been defeated, the board members could have been held personally liable. In fact, the board members, I believe, showed a lot of courage going ahead, because if they had not been backed up by the delegates had voted, no, you didn't have the right to do that. The board members would have been personally liable, and also, I mean, the other side probably would have prevailed in the lawsuit. It would have just been an absolute disaster for the USCF and an even bigger disaster for the board members. I don't think board members should be put in that situation. I think when there's an emergency situation, the board must act. They should be in a position where they can do what they believe is right without worrying that someone might come to the next delegates meeting who's a good speaker and make a persuasive argument, convince 51% of the delegates to vote that action was illegal. And you know, I don't think we want to be in that situation. I mean, the board is entrusted with certain things, and when they do those things, you know, that should just be it. I mean, you shouldn't be able to second guess things like that.
I could further respond to Steve. Steve, I share your concern. That's why if you look at the delegates' call, you will not see my name as a sponsor of a resolution. I thought the wording about this in the original proposal was inadequate. I am satisfied, though, that the ISBA wording does everything I want to protect the delegates' right to see that if a wrong decision is made, because you see, ratification just says it's legal. It doesn't mean we agree that it's right. If you think the decision is wrong, you go to the floor and fight it. Like last year, we had a fight about going to the CAS arbitration. But we didn't bring that up for ratification because that wasn't the proper way to bring it up. This doesn't bar the delegates from bringing up at the meeting with a resolution any action they believe the board is mistaken, or any policy the board adopted that it believes is mistaken. Ratification is not the place to deal with that.
And further, if the board action that was taken is contrary to the bylaws, it's illegal anyway. Sure.
Joe Larson, Alabama. I haven't heard a compelling case why the board of directors in flux is really a big deal. I mean, we've been getting along this way for so long. Where's the beef?
Something that's a family that's dysfunctional doesn't mean that just because it has functioned somewhat doesn't mean that that's the optimal way to handle it. Until, watch that step over there. Until recently, he fell into the chair. That's good. I thought you were a better lawyer than that. You're supposed to fall on the ground and you can sue the bastards. What's wrong with you? Until very recently, if you polled most of the delegates, they thought the executive board was the board of directors. Mr. Hoffman, is he in here? Would that fit with what you have stated very eloquently, I think?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think the delegates in the past have thought they were the directors, nor desire largely to be the directors. What we are doing is clarifying and making a direct statement and making it clear that the EB is the board, which is what a lot of people think now. Why is it dysfunctional? because it's a freaking administrative nightmare. And it also causes problems potentially with the governance structure of this organization. If you don't know who the directors, the stated rule out well last year by Donna Haller, if you don't know who the directors are, how do you call the directors into session? The directors only meet once a year right now, unless you make an extraordinary effort to have a special meeting. There's no other organization that of any size where the directors meet once a year, maybe twice. It doesn't function. We didn't think we were doing it that way for a long, long time. It's only been in the last few years that we've come to the realization that the delegates were in fact directors.
Directors for 2 days.
Well, they're directors all year. They're not directors for 2 days. That's part of the problem. They are the directors for the entire year. Mr. Emmett?
Just had a question regarding recall provisions. Are any of those changed with this new structure? And one of the methods, I guess, of removing an executive board member that was done was for the delegates, I guess, to ultimately approve the termination of the membership. And is that something that would still be a possibility were necessary to do that to the board of directors?
None of the recall provisions in the existing bylaws are changed by this proposal.
I'm a middle school teacher, so let's get specific. If this group, our delegates, pass a motion saying that Illusionov is a crook, a thief, a killer, whatever, we would be held liable to be sued by them. But under this change, we would not be liable because we would not be the board of directors unless the executive board also confirmed that. Is that correct?
Yeah, the attorney, right. The question is, would that be a mandate? If you're making a simple declaration of an expression of opinion about someone, I guess I don't see that as a mandate, Steve.
I want to see if there's a distinction between the delegates doing it and the board doing it. Is there a distinction? By making it the board of directors, does that exclude us from being sued by statements that individuals or the group as a whole passing a resolution would it make us liable?
Steve, if you slander someone, if you slander someone individually, not that you would ever do it, but if you individually slander someone, your participation as a delegate would not change your personal liability for your personal slander.
Right, I understand that.
Okay? If this group as a whole decided to potentially slander someone, your statement may not be that, by the way. Or it could. I'm not passing any judgment on your comment. If a group as a whole did, then that group could bear responsibility for itself violating the law.
Would they be liable individually, or would the USCF as an organization also be liable?
If the organization didn't do it, the organization cannot be liable. If you as an individual do something in your official capacity with an organization, you may or may not. Depends whether you're operating under the bylaws of that organization. Well, see, if I'm the treasurer of my local church. If I steal money from my local church, the fact that I'm the treasurer doesn't keep me from being liable. Okay? If I pay a bill somebody doesn't like, I'm not liable to the fact that the member didn't like that operation. So, I mean, I don't know how to answer your question in that way on a hypothetical. I don't think it's particularly likely.
Just as the delegates as a whole, can they bind liability to the organization, or must the executive board do that under this proposal, as they would be the directors and not the delegates?
I believe under this proposal, the delegates could still bind the organization because it says the executive board is subject to the mandates of the board of delegates. I would like to make a point of order, if I can, Mr. President or Madam President. It's my understanding at this time that we put this on the floor for discussion and questions, and then indicated we move to take a series of straw votes on specifics and then move to refer it to bylaws and GTF to try and incorporate any suggestions this body had. Is that your understanding of what we're doing?
Yes, straw votes. Take it up again next year.
Okay, very good.
see what kind of progress we can make. This has got to be implemented. The board of directors have got to change from the delegates to the executive board.
Did you have one more comment, then we're going to move to
Well, I was just going to reiterate what my understanding was that, and Harold just clarified, we're just doing straw votes, so I call the question, let's get the delegates sensible.
Right, we want to take the straw vote. What we want to do is take straw votes. We do not want to vote on this proposal. Okay?
Alan, do you want to do the straw vote?
All right,
Point of clarification, I thought we were going to have a motion to postpone this until next year, and
that's the referral motion after the straw vote.
We're going there.
It'll be a refer to committee.
What we want to do is get straw votes for the sense of the body, and then we will be voting to refer this to committee for further study to be brought back next year.
All right, the first thing that the bylaws committee and the workshop voted on was, should the executive board be the board of directors? The committee voted yes, 9-2-1-1.
Order. We were taking straw
votes, just the sense of his body.
Your votes. We want to do our votes.
I'm just informing you what the earlier votes were in case that interests anybody.
Okay.
But obviously what this body votes will be more important than the earlier votes, because there are more people here. The workshop was 27 yes to 3 to 4 to 4. Should the executive board, in your opinion, be the board of directors? That's the first straw vote. Want me to take the vote, actually? All in favor of that, raise your credential or your hand if you've misplaced it like me. We're going to have to. Do I have to count? Well, I think it'd be good to get a count. You want to do a count?
75. Okay, I'll take that. You're
All-
further along than me.
All those opposed, please raise your credential or your hand. Seven. 7. All those abstaining, raise your hand or credential.
We need that.
Sure we do. 10.
10. Okay, the second thing is the wording of the relationship. 75 yes, 7 no, 10 abstain. The second thing is the wording of the clauses about the executive board's relationship with the delegates. Now there, the bylaws committee split on the original wording in the delegates' call, 5 yes, 6 no, 1 abstain, 1 needs more thought, but the amended wording put up here, the workshop endorsed, 32 yes, 0 no, 3 abstentions.
So the straw vote that we're interested in is the feeling of the delegates as to the language that's up here on the screen,
Right.
dealing with the executive board as the board of directors, which is what you see here, and then above it, the rights of the board of delegates.
All those in favor of that wording, please raise your hand or credential.
I have,
Did you get the EB too?
I have 73.
All those opposed, raise your hand or credential.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All those abstaining, hand or credential.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, very good. Final vote, thank you, was 73 yes, 5 no, and again, 10 abstentions.
Some people got tired.
The next question is, should the delegates keep the authority over the rules they now have? If you're in favor of that, please raise your credential on your hand.
that's like everybody, you know.
All right, you just want to say you're unanimous?
A
All
whole
right.
pot full.
Any opposed?
That's something.
Any abstentions?
Chairman rules, of course.
All right, should the delegates continue to supervise ethics compliance? If you're in favor of that, raise your hand.
Not vote for it, we'll file complaints.
Let me do it the other way. Who's opposed? There's nobody opposed to the abstain.
Okay.
Abstain? I don't
One. All right, let's go to the next.
I think you got that.
Should the delegates continue to elect committees, including buy-in audit, bylaws audit, election, and LMA, and ethics?
Let's do it this way. Opposed?
Okay.
In favor?
Many.
Overwhelming, yeah.
It's easier to count. And abstentions. 2, 1, 2, 3.
All right. Abstentions, 3. Should the delegates continue to approve the sale of land in the building?
By the way, there is no change in this. Right now, the delegates must approve the sale of any land or building, and LMA must approve the sale of any land or building. There is no change in this proposal to that. Harold wanted to get a straw vote, though, as to how strongly the delegates feel about the delegates and the LMA retaining that power. Who is opposed to the delegates and the LMA retaining the power over control of the sale of the building? That's what I thought. All in favor? Overwhelming. Any abstention? Seeing none.
We also had a question, should this be a 2-year process or a 1-year process?
We don't need
We
to
think we're in
start.
agreement on 2 years. Well, then that brings us to the, I think, the LMA. All right, if there's, then there's only one more question. By the way, we understood that the modern set proposal has been withdrawn. Now, this is the thing Alan referred to earlier. There are these strict provisions in the Illinois not-for-profit bylaws about committees. It's clear that LMA, as it now functions, would be a problem. We will probably be seeking a legal opinion on some aspects relating to a few other committees, such as ethics and TDC, where it's not clear they can bind because their decisions can be appealed. And the question is, how does that fit in with Illinois law? But LMA clearly doesn't. So an idea came forward at the workshop that Alan has developed, which I think he's already explained, of trying to create a separate corporation for LMA to avoid this problem with the Illinois statutes. We'll give it to Alan. I just want to mention the meeting overwhelmingly endorsed this, 31 yes, 1 no, 1 abstain.
A couple of questions that were asked in the workshop about the separate corporation idea. Would the separate corporation have a separate audit? No. It would still be an affiliate of the U.S. Chess Federation, and the audit of the USCF would include the audit of its affiliate. Would it have to file a separate tax return? Most likely not, for the same reason. It depends a little bit on the structure. We do a lot of this in our practice, and likely it would not require the filing of a separate 990 unless the LMA undertook actions that would generate unrelated business income and require the filing of the 990-T. For any of you all who are accountants in the audience, you know what I said. The rest of you, you don't care.
Point of information, Bill Hall. A question for you, Alan.
Yes.
I understand the idea about the creation of another corporation there. Do we get into a situation where that then becomes a 3-step process that we have to meet back here next year to form this corporation with the delegates, and then have to wait till the year after to find the executive board as the board of directors?
That's not what we're proposing. We're proposing to get it formed and have this change all be in effect at the next meeting.
what all is involved with forming this new corporation.
That's what we're going to work on between now and next year and bring it back. The effective date would not take effect right after the delegates meeting next year. The effective date would be at the end of 2012. Because all the delegates' terms currently run to 2012 with an issue that Harold's going to address in just a second with regard to DALs. But that's why we would do it at that point. And then between then and the end of the year, once it was approved, we get the assets transferred to the corporation, set up, the elected directors here, because we would have the intention to do it. Those would be incorporating directors, and we'll make it happen between then and the end of the year.
So it doesn't add any extra time to being able to designate?
Not unless the lawyers tell us differently, but I can't imagine why it would.
If you're interested in the point Alan raised, which is simply this, most of us here have a one-year term, the exception being the executive board, but that wouldn't be a problem. But the other big exception is the delegates at large. So what the workshop discussed was that the bylaws committee should create a form, which we have, which was a resignation letter stating that as of, I believe, January 1st, 2013, the person is resigning their capacity as director, which is due to their position as delegate, only resigning as director, because the directors would just be the executive board. We got the form prepared with the help of Richard Kepke of Northern California last night. I met this morning during the meeting separately with all 6 of the DALs we renamed this year. All 6 have signed that. I also met with the 2 DALs we named last year, and they both signed it as well. So we're getting full cooperation from the DALs, and we're moving forward. It's not that we're doing nothing and just waiting for next year.
So we've done what we wanted to do, I think, which is... Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't take that, did we? We would like to get the sense of the delegates as to the idea of a separate corporation for the LMA, directors of which would be appointed by the Board of Delegates at its annual meeting, and then the LMA then would hold the assets that it now holds.
All those in favor of that exploration, please raise your hand or credential. If you want to count it, just go to the nose. Let's go to the nose. All those against, put them down. All those against, raise your hand or credential.
2 abstentions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Overwhelming in favor, 2 against, 5 abstain. And then I think I'd like to move to refer this resolution to the Bylaws Committee and to the GTF, assuming it continues to exist, to report next year, and hopefully we can finalize everything then.
Second. Do you have any discussion? Okay. Okay, all in favor? Opposed?
Madam Chairman, as we get ready to move to the next item of business, again, I'd like to thank the GTF members and the bylaws members. It was a lot of work that we have put into it so far. It's a lot of work still remaining, and we appreciate your guidance through this weekend.
Thank you.
Motion is referred to bylaws and GTF.
Point of order. We have a certification problem. I've discussed this with Mike Nolan. We had a similar thing earlier where someone was here that was not a delegate, but the president, the emails went back and forth. We have a problem in one state that the president is out at a funeral and can't be reached. Everyone else was emailed in there, but the person here from that state is not an officer. So therefore, I've been asked to, since I'm kind of neutral for everybody knows I like break big streams together sometimes, I've been asked to make a motion to accept what the state has because the president's there and can't get in touch. Everybody else agrees in the state that they accept the delegate for the state of New Jersey of Sam Sloan. And I hope we can have a vote on that. But, it has to be voted on by the delegates because the president, otherwise it wouldn't even come up with Mike taking care of it.
Well, I'm trying not to take a position on that. I do want to call the body's attention to the relevant bylaws provision. And it's my understanding, subject to correction from Tony Cattell, that while the New Jersey treasurer is clearly in favor of this, it's not a matter that all the other offices in New Jersey have been consulted and agreed on it. Or am I wrong in that, Tony?
Well, I don't think, are you the treasurer?
Not Tony, I'm sorry, Leroy Dubek, I apologize. Leroy, am I confused or what?
As far as I know, I got a call last night from the treasurer stating we wanted to appoint for Sam Sloan because we have vacancies, three vacancies in New Jersey. The president had a death in the family and is in Iowa, is out of state. There's no way it can be reached. So what we're left with, clearly he doesn't know about it. I mean, he's literally out of contact. So to say all the other officers know, the statement is the other officers can't know because the president's away. The treasurer has sent this request, has talked to me, I think has talked to Bill Hall also, and has sent it in writing. The treasurer is Ken Thomas, he is the current treasurer. He is not, however, physically in this room. This was sent.
Thank you. All right, here is the provision in the bylaws. If you look at page 30, Article 5, Section 5B, what it says is, the state president or senior state officer present may add names to the end of the ordered list for that state for the purpose of seating delegates at the annual meeting of a board of delegates, providing the persons added at that time reside in a state being represented or in a state adjacent to it. My understanding is Mr. Sloan is from New York and therefore is in an adjacent state. I think the delegates need to determine for themselves how the rest of that would apply to this situation.
Point of information. Is there a state affiliate officer present?
No.
No.
That's the problem. That's the basic problem.
I also have a question. Even if he was being added, even if Mr. Sloan was being added to the end of the ordered list, that wouldn't make him a delegate unless one of the delegates from New Jersey resigned.
There are plenty of...
Which delegate from New Jersey is resigning to make way for Mr. Sloan, assuming that he is allowed to join the list?
Well, I think the idea is New Jersey is going on their reading of 5A, where we had that deemed to have resigned. There are New Jersey delegates missing, and I believe they're saying if he's added as an alternate delegate, then he would meet the criteria under Article 5, Section 5A.
So are all of them deemed to have resigned?
No. They have to be here, or just one of them, and this is only for the 1 year. Next year, the affiliate will appoint whoever they want. Yeah.
In answer to the question, which one, the way we've interpreted before, would be the delegate at the bottom of the delegate list who's not there.
Madam Chairman, there seems to be a little discrepancy in this, so I move to refer this item to the Bylaws Committee for further study.
It's a point of order, and it has to be voted on, since it is a certification of the delegate.
Properly speaking, a point of order is a point raised to the chair upon which the chair makes a ruling after consulting appropriate authorities, such as, in this case, the chair of the Bylaws Committee. There really is nothing to vote on, therefore there is really no motion, therefore there is nothing to refer at this time. The chair could ask that the Bylaws Committee study the matter, That's not the same as the body doing that. Is that clear enough?
If the chair does that, I believe the States Committee should be included as well, since there's an issue here of, what a state affiliate can do. It shouldn't be just violence.
That's about it.
And my feeling is, since some of the, like in our delegation, there's only 3 of us here, and yet we have 7. I think the state should be allowed as many people as they want, as many different views as they want to encourage, that following all the procedures.
That's not clear.
I understood there was a motion on the floor to refer to bylaws, and you don't want to, is that off the floor? Then I just call the question on the original motion. I like to.
Helen, there is no motion before the body, so there's nothing to refer, there's nothing to call the question on. This is a point of order raised to the chair. The chair is entitled to ask opinions of people, which could include delegates, which could include chairs of appropriate committees, which could include parliamentarians. I don't disagree with you.
Okay, so I have a question. Wasn't there a 9:30 deadline this morning for getting credentials? Or have people been getting?
No, the 9:30 deadline, I believe, is what Harold was referring to. If somebody who is not present has not shown up by 9:30, then they are deemed to have resigned. In which case, then there is a vacancy in that state which could be filled from the list of additional alternates.
But they're only deemed to resign if there's an available alternate there to replace them.
Well, yeah, right.
And there is.
The technical aspect of this is, under our bylaws, Harold, correct me if I'm wrong on this, under our bylaws there are 3 ways somebody can be added to the list of delegates or alternates. One is that the state chapter, the state affiliate, can make that recommendation as a body. That's in one section of the bylaws.
Yes.
In another section of the bylaws, there are 2 provisions. One is that the state president may add someone to the list. The second one is that the senior officer present from the state chapter can make that recommendation. The different distinction being that the state president can do it even if he's in Pago, assuming he can reach us. And that's the problem here, is that the state president is in, I believe, Missouri at a funeral and not reachable. Ken Thomas is not the state president. He is not, under our bylaws, authorized to make that addition to the list. The question would be, do we want as a body to waive that rule? Whether, and I would defer to Harold as to what form that waiver would need to take.
Well, we also run into the situation where those delegates have not been deemed to resign, because they're only deemed to resign if there is an alternate on the ordered list who was here, ready to serve at 9:30 this morning.
No, that's not true, because
That's what the bylaws provision says.
it could be later. And we also
Read the provision.
We have, I'd like to point out that Ken Thomas emailed everybody, all the officers there in New Jersey, and got it unanimous. So as far as the reading,
I see no evidence of that.
do you have that?
If he sends an email to everybody, nobody responds, that doesn't mean agreement.
And it's irrelevant because the senior state officer is not present. The treasurer is not the senior state officer unless the New Jersey Chess Association is organized in a peculiar way.
Motion to suspend the rules. I'd like to ask for a motion, ask to suspend the rules so that we can vote on this motion and discuss it further.
Second. That's in order, yes, that's fine. It would take a 2/3 majority to suspend the rules. It would take a simple majority to then pass whatever it is suspended to do.
All questions.
discussion?
Well, I recommend that the rules not be suspended. You have the authority yourself to make that decision as chair, Ruth, and I ask you to please make the decision.
It's already been seconded, and discussion. So, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
So all in favor of suspending the rules?
Thank you.
We have to count this. Yeah.
Actually, it probably would have been simpler if I just voted for the certified family. Oh, yeah. Maybe then I can go down and make my report. Exactly. So raise your way. Well, go down there and get line now. I better get in front of you.
All opposed?
That's clearly not enough.
It's not too big.
Tony, you're opposed?
Yes.
Why are you opposed
Thank
to
you,
calling the
Richard.
question?
I think that's the correct way to do it.
Because we know suspending the rules. It was
Suspending the rules clearly mean that they...
No, suspending the rules. Let's talk about
This way Ruth has to make the
I count 21 no's.
I counted 15.
Then why don't you count them again?
Okay, let's do the yeses and let's do the... Everybody get your hand up and leave it up, because people were raising their hands in the middle. This is for yes. Yes.
Okay, the board wants to suspend the rules. I'll suspend the rules. Because then I'd like to vote against it.
Yeah.
Well, you're letting him have the...
Is yours up? Is your hand up, sir?
He's not a delegate.
You're not a delegate?
No badge, no vote.
17, 18, 19, 20, 21,
It sounds like one man, one vote.
16 no voting.
5,
Very fast, like that.
39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48. I've got 50.
And against?
I've got 22. Did you get 22? Now, what were the rules suspended to do? If I may advise the chair, credentials issues fall under kind of an unusual section of Robert's rules. The normal way that credentials issues are dealt with is to appoint a credentials committee which this goes off, considers the issue, come back to the body, and makes a recommendation. We could either do that, and you could pick a few people to be the credentials committee and do that, or we could just say dispense with that and vote yes or no. It's your call.
I'd like to be transparent and have a vote. So, all right, is there any other discussion?
What was the vote for?
Whether Sam gets to be a delegate or not.
At this point, we're going to vote yes or no for Sam Sloan.
Excuse me.
On whether he's delegate.
Point of information. Were the rules suspended? Yes. What about abstentions? Were they counted?
Abstentions are not counted when taking a vote. Someone who abstains is yielding to the will of the majority.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to be sure.
Could I,
Sure, go ahead, Ron.
this is basically a question of privilege from a parliamentary point of view, and it's up to the chair to rule on it. However, the chair can refer these kinds of decisions to consultants. The chair does not have to make the decisions. And once the decision is made, anybody can appeal the ruling of the chair. So if the chair wants to have transparency and have a vote, that can be achieved by the chair making a ruling with or without consultant input, and then there being a vote on appeal. And the rules also allow the chair to immediately refer the question to the body without there needing to be an appeal. So you could rule right now, you could delay pending some input from whoever you choose as consultants, or you would make a ruling and appeal it, let the body vote on it.
I'm referring to the committee of the delegates for a vote.
Do you think it's a good idea for anybody who's caused any losses? Do you think we should have a rule that if anybody's created or caused USCF lawsuit or legal issues, that they should have a right to be on a governing body or a delegate? Yeah, we should not be voting. Is this something we should vote on? Let's vote on this.
What if we all
Is there a
stay?
motion to consider?
Sam gets on me? Yeah.
I assume the motion would be that Sam's going to be seated as a delegate from New Jersey.
And yes, we take 51%.
My understanding is that being a credentials matter, it passes with a simple majority.
Is there any more discussion?
Luis Salinas from Texas. Now, I'm not familiar with the New Jersey bylaws or constitution, but in Texas, if the president's not available, the vice president does takes over the duties. I'm very uncomfortable with, well, I hear that no one's available. I hear that it's unanimous. I mean, I'd rather just follow the letter of the rules, and if their constitution allows their vice president, that their vice president tell us that it's okay for him to be an alternate delegate.
It wasn't the vice president we heard from, it was the president.
I understand. I understand. I'm just saying I'm uncomfortable right now with this. I hear that it's unanimous. I just don't know that it is, and I don't think as the body we should break our procedures on hearsay.
I also would like to read the relevant section of the bylaws, which are on page 30 of your call. Section 5, miscellaneous vacancies, skipping down. The alternate delegates are available to attend the annual meeting of delegates. However, those delegates who have not picked up their credentials by 9:30 of the first day of the delegates meeting shall be deemed to have resigned as delegates, and the available alternate delegates will become delegates per the ordered list. Since there were no available delegates at 9:30, none of those delegates have resigned.
Point of order. We've already voted to suspend the rules. Therefore, any discussion whether or not this violates the rules seems to be irrelevant.
You can't violate the bylaws.
No, we
No, the bylaws are...
Tim, it's time. Down there.
If it's the intention of the state for Sam to represent them as one delegate, why should we go against their intentions by using rules of technicalities instead of going with what they would like us to comply with in representation? But this is the type of thing that you as a director, your school directors, this is a man that's willing to sue you, every one of you, for whatever action you take, so be prepared.
Just like
Then we can sue him.
I don't think the fundamental question we have before us is... I think it's this microphone, sir. I was waiting in line for... I call the question. The fundamental question of the bylaws is the state. Question has been called, there's no debate. The fundamental question here is, was there a state officer present or not?
No.
Right? And it wasn't, so the only thing we're debating, are we going to waive that rule of our bylaws?
That was
Right?
the previous vote.
And I think instead of the question being, are we going to vote Sam Sloan, we should do an alternate question of, are we willing to waive that provision for this? I think instead of putting a lot of regular officers, Sam Sloan saying he didn't vote him, we vote on our bylaws and let him fight the bylaws.
This is what I warned you about. Severe suspension.
Is the chair going to overrule anything else here? I called the question and you allowed someone to keep speaking. It's up to you now. I called the question, there's supposed to be no debate, obviously I was wrong.
Exactly. Is there an objection to calling the question? What we wanted to do here was get to have everyone heard.
No.
And we have 2 more.
No, not on the question.
Okay. Is there an objection?
Yes.
Now you have to vote on whether or not we get to call the question.
Why do you have to approve and suspend it?
No, we can't suspend that rule yet. It takes 2/3 to do that.
No debates been slammed.
Vote on calling the question requires 2/3 to pass.
Yes.
All in favor?
Voting whether or not you want to vote.
Voting on Sam Sloan. We're calling the question.
It's not funny.
We're questioning the objection.
All right, we want to call the question. I think that's 2 things. That's 2 things.
In favor?
Well, I think it's 2 things.
All right, you have to count.
Oh, it's 2. I thought it was 2.
All in favor?
Calling the voters whether to call the question.